It's been a month or two since Anbernic had released a device, so you know what that means. New emulation handheld time. Anbernic just released the RG28XX, which is a smaller version of some of their other handhelds like the RG35XXH or the 35XX Plus. It shares some things in common with those devices, such as it has the same H700 SoC with the same 1GB of GDDR4 RAM, dual microSD card slots, a micro HDMI port, and USB-C port for charging. That means this device is compatible with all the same consoles and has plenty of power for all your 8 and 16-bit games, even N64 and PS1 games. N64 is a bit of a struggle, but we'll get to that. The main gimmick of this one is that it's small. It has a 640 by 480p 2.8-inch IPS screen, hence the 28 in the RG28XX name, which is a nice little detail that I think is kind of cool. It has a 3100 mAh battery that gets you 4.5 hours of playtime, which is pretty good. Standby is also pretty good, so if you just want to stick this thing into your bag and just forget about it, it won't die if you leave it in there for a few days. Moving on to the device itself. It has good enough build quality, a mostly plastic construction, though it still feels good in the hands. It's about as thick as an Anbernic RG35XXH. It has a weight of 4.4 ounces. The face buttons are quite small, akin to a DS or a Nintendo Switch in size, a little bit smaller than those. I do wish that they were bigger, but aside from that, they're fine. The shoulder buttons are also just okay. I almost wish Anbernic would have just chosen to have one set of shoulder buttons instead of two, just so you can have larger shoulder buttons overall, because I don't really see myself playing any consoles that would require having the full complement of shoulder buttons. It comes in an assortment of colors. It comes in colors like beige white, which is just purple and white, transparent black, which is my favorite color, lava orange, which is my least favorite color, and DMG gray and red, which is a pretty nice colorway. Out of all the micro handhelds out there, I like this one the most so far. I found it the most playable of the smaller handhelds, and it's still small enough that I can just take with me wherever I go without it being a big deal, and it's big enough so that I can still play it comfortably for a long time. Moving on to the emulation performance, it runs everything pretty good. All the Game Boy games run really well, Game Boy Color, and it comes with all of its variety of, colors and, borders and whatnot. Game Boy Advance did require me to set a custom scaling, but after that, it was mostly fine. I had to do that for some of the other, non 4x3 consoles, but if it's a 4x3 system, it scaled perfectly and I had to do nothing to get that to look perfect. Most of the 4x3 systems ran great. And the vast majority of these consoles are 4x3. It's basically the PSP and the Game Boy Advance that I had to deal with. Other consoles were basically perfect. I was able to run basically any PS1 game at a 2x resolution, which out of all of the 3D consoles, the only one that I really played was the PS1 on this handheld, because there were a lot of 2D titles for the PS1, and on top of that, the button mapping for the PS1 games were by far the best and most consistently worked, or at least felt good enough to keep playing, especially because this device only has the D-pad and the face buttons. It doesn't have any analog sticks. N64 games ran pretty good for the most part. My biggest problem with running N64 games on a handheld like this is due to the lack of extra face buttons or analog sticks. It makes playing some of these games not ideal. Like, you can get away with playing Mario Kart, F-Zero, even Mario 64, but the moment you start trying to play other games like Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, Quest 64, it just starts getting a little weird and the button mappings stop being, functional, because you just don't have enough buttons, or they're mapped in such a way that it makes it really annoying to play. And even sometimes you can hit roadblocks by not being able to access certain things because of the button mappings. Don't get me wrong, the performance is there. This can handle N64. Some of the games you might need a frame skip, but you should be fine. Ideally for me, I would love a console at this size that has at least one analog stick. It would greatly improve the overall playing of 3D games on this kind of device. That's why PS1 was so good. I was able to play a lot of the 2D titles like Symphony of the Night or the first Rayman. Most of the 2D titles on PS1 ran pretty good, and any 3D titles like Croc just were fine enough with just the face buttons. Even Crash Bandicoot, which originally released on the PS1 with the non-analog stick PS1 controller. It came out before that even existed. So D-pad actually felt pretty good. N64 just requires more buttons that this thing doesn't have. And it's just not an ideal experience. You can definitely do it. You can definitely play a lot of N64 games on this way. But the vast majority of the games that I would play that on N64 just didn't play that well on this device. Then again, that's just my personal opinion. If you don't mind going through the effort and putting in the work to find and make the correct button mapping that would work for you, that's great. But for me, I simply won't recommend this device for people who want 3D emulation. Dreamcast runs pretty good. It does require a frame skip for some games, but it felt good enough. I'm not a big Dreamcast person. I played most of the Dreamcast games when they started going off into other consoles, so it's fine. It's good enough for me. It has the same problems as N64. It just doesn't have enough buttons to play the games, most of them. So if you have any like fighting games or 2D platformers, those would run great, but just the lack of buttons makes playing anything like Sonic Adventure or Jet Set Radio just kind of annoying. PSP, as I mentioned before, has the same scaling issues that GBA did, but once you set the correct scaling, once again, it looks fine enough on this screen. It looks quite nice just because of how small it is, which is cool. Overall performance, though, was less than ideal. PSP had a really hard time running any 3D titles, and I think it has something to do with Anbernic removing the dedicated PSP emulator section, and it just has something to do with the fact that it struggles with the orientation on the device. So hopefully some custom firmware will come out eventually that would fix that issue, but overall PSP just doesn't run all that great. The moment you start running 3D titles, performance goes into the tank. Even with frame skip, it's just on the edge of playable, and most 2D titles were okay, but there wasn't a lot of that PSP that I wanted to emulate. I mostly got this device for a super tiny thing to play Game Boy and Super Nintendo games. It's just what I see these kind of handhelds being perfect for. It's the same reason why I bought a BitBoy all the way back in the day. It's just the perfect device to just throw in my backpack or throw into my jacket pocket and just leave it there for weeks at a time, grabbing it and playing occasionally when I'm either waiting for somebody in the car, at a restaurant waiting for my table. It's just a very nice small handheld that you can really take anywhere with you. Moving on to the conclusion. Would I recommend this device to someone? Yes, if you're looking for basically the smallest device you can realistically play on for long times, yeah, I would highly recommend this device. It offers great performance for the consoles that work with its control scheme, and it's awesome. It has the screen, for what it's worth, is quite nice, and you can get some pretty fun colors. It's perfect for kids. It comes at a price of $47.99. It is a killer price. You can definitely just buy like 2 of these things for your kids, and in case they break one, you got another one. Or if you have a low budget and you just want to play some of the basic consoles, this is a perfect little thing to get your way into the emulation scene. Not the kindest operating system, but hopefully custom firmware will come out to supplant Anbernic's horrible operating system. I can't begin to say how much I despise their operating system because I went on multiple rants in other videos, but operating system is usable at best. But the problem I have with the device is that if you want it for 3D emulation, N64, PSP, Dreamcast, I don't think this is the best device for you. Go get the slightly more expensive, by like $20, Anbernic RG28XX. That device is far more optimized for 3D games, being able to comfortably play N64, PS1, PSP, all those a lot better than this device could. But if you're super interested in only having a portable device that you can take anywhere without it being, an encumbrance, this is the perfect device. This is my favorite, almost micro gaming device. Let me know what you guys think. Are you interested in this kind of a device? Do you think it needs to be smaller, or do you wish it had, something of an analog stick? I would love to hear what you guys think down below. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, all that other social media garbage down below. And last but not least, have a wonderful day.